Hi guys, welcome to the Delaware Studios. Let's get to talk about Android pagination, whereby we'll be loading more pages of data in the Movies app. You might find yourself working with a structured API and huge contents which comes in pages like the MoviesDB API. Using an infinite scroll which loads more data on scroll to the last set of data in a recycler view will do the trick. In this video, you'll be learning how to load more pages of the most rated video from the MoviesDB API to a linear layout recycler view with implementation of infinite scroll till the end of the stipulated number of pages set. Let's get started. We have the API link, as you can see from the browser, which is pointing at the popular or most rated, anyone you feel like. Calling their API key, you need to lock your API key at this point, and the page numbers you want to load. We have 7, you can load 10, you can load more than that, but just for this purpose we'll be loading 5, and we have 7 right there, and you have the bunch of JSON data which you're ready to consume. I use the JSON formatter to get it more clearly, and if you notice, we have the key value pairs right there. The page, we have 7 pages. The total results 1900, and if you notice, we have total pages of 989. So you have pages of 989 from the DB API which you can consume. You can consume the whole pages, but I don't think you need that. So you can just only consume 5 pages or 7 or 10 pages, and you have all their results, as you can see right there from the formatted JSON data. So I'll be illustrating the studio, and I'll be teaching you on how to actually consume these pages using pagination, infinite scroll, whereby you load. There'll be a loading icon that keeps displaying anytime you get to the last set of data that has been uploaded or has been consumed, so you get to have fresh data at the end of scroll. So let's get started. Right there in Android Studio, we'll be starting up from the build Gradle. Always the build Gradle, where you have your dependency setup. You have the app compacts, the support design, recycler view, card view, even from the bump tech glide for loading images and also catching them. You have a retrofit and the converter JSON, which converts the bunch of key value pairs to just the model for which you can use as objects in Java. You have the constraint layouts that you can use for advanced layout structure. Cool. Heading to the layout, which is the res folder, the activity main, you get to look at how the activity main looks. We have a recycler view right there wrapped around the frame layout, and a progress bar. If you notice, the progress bar keeps static there. You get to programmatically make that display and disappear gracefully with an idea of main progress. Cool. And the item list, in any recycler view, you have the list of items which you actually gonna display on the recycler view. It's wrapped around the frame layout as well, with a card view of each set of data, and the progress bar follows right there on the image. You have a kind of lazy loading, while because the glide will actually be connecting to the internet to load those images. In the process of doing that, there will be a sort of loading continually until the image gets finished, and there will be a catching strategy mechanism from glide which we'll be using right there. You have it right there in the image view, which you can see, and the linear layout wrapped around other aspects of the content, where you have the movie year, the movie title, and the movie description. You have the setup, so those items will be rather seated on the card, and they're going to serve as the movie details of each linear layout. The item progress, which houses the progress bar to load more content anytime it gets to the end of the set of data loaded. So you have that set up as well, the progress bar. So you only need these three layout functionalities. Right there, we'll be moving ahead to the Java classes. Just start off from the API. We should be familiar with this if you've covered my movies API and my movies video right from the beginning to the end. We're going to have a client service because you're using Retrofit to actually serve as the network library here. Get to look at the client, and the client, that's where you get to set up your base URL, which points down to the MoviesDB API.org / the 3 and / you edit with a / just this way, and you get to the client where you get to set up the base URL. You add the converter factory, which you get from the JSON converter factory, and you build up. So you have that set up right there in the get client static method. Cool. Get to look at the service. In the service, that's where you have your endpoint. Which endpoints are you pointing at? And you get to have it this way, because we're getting data, we are not posting, or we are not putting, we're not deleting as well. So we're getting data. You have the get annotation from Retrofit, very important, and the path to where you're pointing at the movie / popular or / top rated. And after this, you would have generated the POJO, that's plain object Java notation. So that POJO actually depicts like a mock of the structured JSON you're having, and we have that right there in the model where you have the movie and the movie response. You're going to use you can use the POJO generator, which will actually helps you out once you actually copy the bunch of this JSON. You copy it down there, and the POJO generator will actually do that automatically for you, and you could have your model this way. The movie, which implements pass label, very cool. It's good to implement pass label so that you could actually helps you out when you're trying to call an intent to another activity. You don't need to reference each of the objects. You can just reference the whole class, and other aspects of the objects would have been carried along. So you have that set up this way. The set and get method of each functionality, each keynote right there in the JSON, which you saw. And even the movie response, this is going to be the results, which you'll be getting the list of each result, and also the pages. Can you notice the total pages, the total results, the result itself, and the page, which you have excuse me, which you have right there. So you have that set up and ready to consume. Cool. Headed back to the service. In the service now, we could actually make a call to different points in time. You make the call to the movie response, which you've seen, which is just the result you'll be expecting, and you could call a method called get popular movies or get top rated movies, and you point down to the query. First query you have is the API key, which you lock in, and the value. I think I've told you on how to actually lock in your API key. You do that from the creative properties. You set that up, and you actually add that right there in the build Gradle, and you build it up so that you could use the build config to point to your API key. The page as the second query you'll be pointing at, and the index you'll be adding. We'll be adding that right there in the main activity. You could have 5, you could have 10, you could have 20 index pages. So that's actually going to bring about this URL, the API, the MoviesDB.org /3 /movie /popular, the query sign, and API key equals to, you need to lock in your API key there, and the page number, which is 7. So that's actually come up with a bunch of this. So this service set that up. Cool. From here, we head straight to the utils. Let's get to look at the utils before we even decompile more further. In the query utils, you have the pagination scroll listener. This is an helper class called abstract anyway, because you'll be using it rather than the main activity, which extends the recycler view on scroll listener. So while scrolling, there's a listener set up to that recycler view. We'll be using a linear layout manager for now. This code is actually supporting linear layout manager. Further research is done for a grid layout, which I'll be coming up next in this video, how to actually display it in grids. But for now, let's maintain a linear layout. And cool. We have a constructor of the pagination scroll listener that takes a layout manager as a parameter and initialize it, as you can see. And you have to override a method called onScrolled. This onScrolled method takes the recycler view, the dx and the y, that's the x and y coordinates, and you have to call the superclass to that, and from there you could actually add up to the scrolled method. You have the visible item count that gets the child count of the layout manager, the total item count that gets the total item count of the layout manager, and the first visible item position of the layout manager as well. So you could test there's a method if it's loading and if it's last page, just to know if it's actually loading or if it has gotten to the last page, and you could test for that. So at that point in time, an inif statement will control that. If the visible item count, when you concatenate, that's concatenate with the first visible item position, if it's greater or equals to the total item count. So that's a kind of mathematical expression there. You add up, not concatenate, rather you add up, because you're adding up integers. Once you use the sign here for integers, you are adding up. But if you should use for string, you're concatenating. Now you're adding up two integer values, which is the visible item count and the first visible item position. So with that calculation, you have to test if it's greater or equals to the total item count, which you have already. And continuation, if the first visible item position is greater or equals to 0, and also if the total item count is greater or equals to get total page count. So those are the parameters which will actually get the load more items triggered. So this is actually gets if you've actually gotten to the stage where the load more items should display, it's going to actually display gracefully. So the unscrolled method takes care of that. Cool. We have other get total page count, is last page count, is loading and load more items, which we'll also be pointing at in the course of this tutorial. Now in the main activity, where we have the bunch of the logic, we have an adapter which we're going to use to bind data together, the linear layout manager, which is actually going to be the display, the recycler view, and the progress bar. Now some static fields. The page start from 1, its loading will be false at present, its last page will be false, and we're going to limit to 5 for this tutorial, since total pages in actual API is very large. You have 589 or so. So feel free to modify this. You could add more, but now we're using 5 pages, so we'll be calling 5. Current page is the page start with the first page, and the service now, we need that object, the movie service. So those are the things we'll be needing. In the onCreate method, you need to initialize those fields, the recycler view, the progress bar, and the adapter. You instantiate the adapter. We'll get to talk about the adapter, which is going to actually be the last part, and that serves as the binding data aspect. Now let's initialize the layout. We'll be using a linear layout. We'll get to try a grid layout later on. Just make this cool. Now you instantiate the new linear layout manager, and you have it vertical. Cool. And you set that to the manager and you also set the item animator, and you set the adapter. Now you need to add on scroll listener to the recycler view, whereby you have to instantiate the abstract class, which is the pagination scroll listener, and you're passing what? The linear layout manager object as its parameter. That's what it listens for. You need to override the load more items, which will be used. Can you notice? If you notice the pagination scroll listener, there's a load more items that was called anytime the visible item count addition with the first visible item position is greater than or equals to the total item count. So you have that set up, and let's get to look at how the load more items is going to look like. At this point in time, is loading will be true, which is actually going to trigger the loading icon. The current page, you have to iterate it by 1, as add 1 to that. So it's actually going to move to the next page. That's what we're talking about. So the first load of the page on end of the first page, that will be an additional 1. So page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5 till the end of the page you set up. Now you're going to mark the network delay for API call. Cool. This is where you use an handler, or you could run a runnable to actually make a sort of delay of 1 second. That's just the calculation here for 1 second, and at the point of delay, there's going to be a load next page method which would be triggered. So we'll get to look at this load next page, and get to look at how it's going to be set up. Now we have the get to count, to page count. Now that has a value. We have it rather set up in the page pagination listener over here. It's an abstract, so we're going to actually use it now and populate values to that. It's going to return the total pages, which we've declared. What do we call that? 5. Cool. And let's move on. This last page is going to return the last page, and is loading also return is loading. And you initialize the movie service, which calls on the client gets client. You have the client setup, which is the base URL, and you create the service with that, and you load the first page. First of all, load the first page on first load. Load the first page, which is the first page, the first index. So it's when it gets to the end of the first page, that's when you trigger the load next page. So I hope you understand how this works. So let's get to look at the load first page, which is the initial load. This is where you make the call to the top rated movie API. You queue that, and you have a callback where you have to override two methods: on response and on failure. On response is when there is successful call, where you fetch the results, you pass that to the list array. The progress bar will be set to gone at this point in time, and you could add all the results to the adapter. Cool. And on failure, you just bring that to the console. You have that set up. Now, if the current page is less than or equals to the total pages, the adapter will call on the loading folder. That if it's less than 12 pages, else this last page will be true. That's once it gets to the last page, just to have a logic to know when it gets to the last page. You have the fetch result, which was called right there inner here to fetch the response. Now let's get to look at how we're going to extract the list from the response. You have the movie response as an object here, where you have the body, and you pass that to the top rated movies, and from there you get the results, which is actually going to be in a list. Cool. You have that set up. Now let's look at the load next page. The load next page will be triggered anytime you get to the last page of the data. The same thing you enqueue with a callback to the movie response one more time. And on response, what you're going to do, you first of all remove the loading folder from the adapter. Get to look at the loading folder right there in the adapter, and its loading will be false at this point in time, and you need to still fetch the results, which is the response. You add all the results down to the list, and now you test if the current page is not equals to the total pages. You add loading folder, just the same call, and this time it's the current page. You're gonna speeded out, so you have a new set of data when you load the next page. Now you have to perform a retrofit call to the top rated movies API, the same API called for pagination, where you have that setup where you call the get top rated movies, you pass in your API key using the build config. If you notice, we have that set up in previous tutorials of Movies API, and the current page. If you notice, the current page will be iterating, so it's not going to be static. It's actually going to be iterating. It's at the load next page you get to know the current page you are. It's going to be iterating, and it's not a static form, so you're going to have new data anytime it gets to the last set of data. Cool. I hope we understand the flow, and we'll get to move further by looking at the adapter. This is just going to bind data to the view, so it's going to be just the same thing we've been acclimatized with. Pagination adapter, what you call the recyclerview adapter, and you have the static item loading one, the base URL, that's for the image. You have a static URL that points to the 150 by 150. We're picking up the small image, and the list array for the movies, and the context, which is the present class, is loading added false. The pagination adapter constructor, now you pass in the context and the result of the list. These are the two things you'll be expecting. You have the get movie and the set movies. They're not called, we're not using them, but let's get to look at when you create the view order. Now the view order case type will be for two, the items and the loading. That's why you could see the switch statement here. For the item, it's going to be for the normal binding of data. While for the loading, it's going to actually trigger the progress bar. That means you've got to the view of the progress bar. You have to show that. That's what that's going to do. That's when you inflate the layout of the item progress and get that displayed. Now let's get the view order, which is the item list to bind data on. Cool. And on bind view order, you get the position of the results, and you have to know which view you're binding to. That's the essence of this case, which you get the item view type position. So the case, if it's an item, you're going to actually set the text to the movie title, you set the text to the year, you've gotten that, and also to the description, and you look at glide to handle image loading. You could learn more on glide here. Let's get to look at more. Where this is the context, the base URL pointing to the path that will get posted path, and now we're adding a listener. This is the first time I'm going to use this listener for you. You're going to actually use a listener, which is actually going to start like a lazy loading of the image, and where you need to override two methods, on exception and on the resource ready. On exception, it takes four parameters rather. The exception itself, the model, the target, and the boolean is the first resource ready or not, true or false. Now it's going to set the visibility of the progress to be gone at this point in time, and that's when you could actually want to catch some of these data to the memory of glide, where we're going to actually use the from memory catch mechanism. If you notice, this parameter actually takes care of that, and also its first resource. So we're going to use the Dix catch strategy, whereby you're going to catch both the original and the resized image. Center crop it, you crossfade it, and you pass that into the poster image order, which is the container. Actually going to paste that too. Cool. The get item count, do a calculation of all the lists of the items you have in the list, and the get item view type position takes cognizance of the position of each of these items. So you could actually use this when you're pointing out to an intent. You have to place a position to each of the items to know on click of an item what are the data attributed to that particular item. You have the add method, which was used to add to the list of the array right there in the main activity, and you need to notify the item inserted as well. You have the add all that add to the bunch of the list, and it's actually going to do a for loop a for each loop here, and for each result of the movie results you had to the result. And this is a remove, which removes from the list of an array. So you could actually remove also, and you notify item removed with a position. So these are all helper methods that will help you to actually achieve what you need. We actually call the add loading folder. If you notice, this is going to actually set is loading added to true, and you need to instantiate the movie. That's another copy of the movie model, where you're going to pass in all the values, the poster part, the title, the description, and sort. A return value by removing the loading folder. So this actually remove that from the data. So you have that set up. Now the view orders, where you're going to actually have an inner class to point to initialize the fields used, and this is where you even need to override the onClick method if you are pointing out to another activity or probably a detail page. We'll cover that in the Movies app. The main focus here is the infinite scroll, the pages, the pagination that we actually integrated. Now we have all the fields initialized right here, and you have the loading view, which is another inner class. You have two inner classes used right there in the adapter, and this actually handles the loading view itself. Which view are we talking about? Are we talking about the item views, or we're talking about the loading view? So we have that set up, either loading or item. So those are the two views we actually used, and if you should look, we actually handle them well, rather than the occurrence loader and evil on the get view order. Fine. A peep into the manifest. Just add your internet permission, you're good to go, and you have that finished up and set up. The main activity has been handled, and so we've actually handled the lazy loading, and the infinite scroll will continually show anytime you get to the last set of data to trigger the load next page. At this point in time, the current page would have iterated by 1, so it's actually not going to be the same data you're calling. You're calling fresh data anytime you load the next page. So with this full analysis, you should be able to have a full grip when it comes to pagination. You could use that in any other APIs, structured APIs that has a bunch of data, and they've actually set it up in a way that it could be called easily. You could have load pages, you could have different forms of way to consume those data, and you could even add your lazy loading or the infinite scroll too to the recycler view. When it gets to the last page, the loading icon shows up and it gets displayed again. So thank you guys for hanging out with me throughout this tutorial, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Have a wonderful time. Bye bye for now.